Why does he only reach for her? The question passed through DeMarco Hall in a whisper, but Vampire King Christian DeMarco heard it as clearly as thunder. Beneath a ceiling of black marble and crystal chandeliers, more than 300 guests stood frozen around the royal dais, their polished glasses untouched, their elegant smiles gone. At the center of it all, 8-month-old Prince Leo cried in the arms of his royal nurse, his tiny body trembling beneath a silver blanket embroidered with the DeMarco crest. He had been crying for nearly an hour. Physicians had checked his breathing. Healers had murmured ancient prayers. Noble women from the oldest vampire families had offered jeweled toys, soothing songs, and carefully rehearsed affection. Nothing worked. Each time one of them came close, Leo's cries grew sharper, as though something in their presence frightened him. Christian sat motionless on his throne, but the carved obsidian beneath his fingers had begun to crack. He had ruled for more than 600 years. He had faced rebellions, famine, betrayal, and wars that had erased entire bloodlines from history. None of those things had made him feel as powerless as the sound of his son struggling for breath. "Enough," Christian said. His voice was quiet, yet every candle flame in the hall bent toward him. The royal nurse stopped immediately. The musicians lowered their instruments. Even the members of the High Council turned their eyes away. Christian rose, tall and severe in a black formal coat, his dark hair swept back from a face that seemed carved from winter itself. "End the presentation, clear the hall." Before the guards could move, a silver spoon slipped from a serving tray near the edge of the crowd. It struck the marble floor with a bright, delicate sound. A young waitress bent quickly to retrieve it. Her name was Mila Collins. Though no one in the royal court knew that yet, she was 26, 5'5", and dressed in a plain black uniform that had been altered twice to fit her. She had taken the shift only because another server had called in sick, and the extra $200 would help cover her foster grandmother's medication. Mila had been warned not to speak to the royal family, not to make eye contact with the council, and under no circumstances to step onto the raised platform. She intended to follow every rule. Then she heard the baby cry. The sound stopped her hand halfway to the spoon. It was not the cry of a spoiled child. It was frightened, exhausted, lonely. Mila looked up before she could remind herself not to. Prince Leo was staring directly at her. His cheeks were wet. His small hands had been clenched against the nurse's shoulder, but now one fist opened, then the other. The child leaned toward Mila and reached across the empty space between them. The room went silent. Not quieter, silent. Mila glanced behind her, certain the baby must be reaching for someone else. There was no one there. "Keep moving," her supervisor whispered from several feet away, his face pale. Mila picked up the spoon and tried to step back. Leo cried harder. His tiny fingers stretched toward her, desperate now. Christian's gaze shifted from his son to the waitress. His eyes were dark, almost black. But when they settled on Mila, a faint crimson light moved beneath them. "You," he said. Mila froze. Every instinct told her to lower her head. Instead, she met his gaze for one brief second. It felt like standing at the edge of a frozen ocean. "Come forward." Mila's heart struck hard against her ribs. "Your Majesty, I'm only serving tonight." A few nobles exchanged disapproving looks. Mila heard one woman whisper the word human as though it were an accusation. Christian stepped down from the dais. The air seemed colder around him. "My son is reaching for you. I don't know why." "Neither do I." There was no anger in his voice. That frightened her more. Mila approached slowly, stopping about 3 feet from the nurse. Leo's cries softened at once. His breathing, which had been quick and uneven, began to settle. Christian noticed. So did every physician standing nearby. Closer, took one more step. Leo stopped crying. The sudden quiet felt impossible. The baby stared at her with wide grey eyes, the same storm-colored eyes as his father, then gave a small, unsteady sound that was almost a laugh. A murmur swept across the hall. The royal nurse looked shaken. "He has never done that, my lord." Christian did not answer. His attention remained fixed on Mila. "Hold out your hand." Mila hesitated. "Will he hurt me?" Something changed in Christian's expression. Not softness, something older, something wounded. "No," he said. "He will not." Mila raised her hand. Leo wrapped his fingers around one of hers. Warmth moved through her skin, gentle but immediate, like sunlight passing through a closed window. The baby inhaled deeply. For the first time that evening, his face relaxed. The royal physician stepped closer, listening to Leo's heartbeat with sharpened vampire senses. His eyes widened. "Your Majesty," he whispered. "The fever is falling." Christian's head turned sharply. "Check again." The physician did. His hands trembled as he placed 2 fingers against the child's neck. "It is falling. I cannot explain it." Mila tried to pull her hand away, overwhelmed by the hundreds of eyes watching her, but Leo held on and made a soft protesting sound. "I should return to work," she said. "No," Christian replied. The single word crossed the hall like a locked door. Mila looked at him. "I haven't done anything." "That is what concerns me." Studying her face, her hands, the simple silver necklace at her throat, nothing about her appeared unusual. No royal emblem, no magical charm, no scent of vampire blood. She looked exactly like what she claimed to be. A tired waitress who had expected an ordinary night of carrying trays, yet his son, who had rejected every healer and noble in the kingdom, clung to her as if he had been waiting for her. Christian lifted his gaze toward the guards. "Seal the palace records room. No one leaves until her identity is verified." Mila's breath caught. "My identity, your name, Mila Collins." The moment she said it, an elderly councilman near the back of the hall dropped his glass. It shattered across the marble. Christian heard the old vampire's heartbeat stumble. Mila heard only the breaking crystal. She turned toward the sound, confused. The councilman stared at her as though a ghost had walked into the room. Then Prince Leo tightened his grip around Mila's finger, and beneath the silver blanket, a faint golden light began to glow over his heart. The golden light lasted only 3 seconds, but it changed the room. It spread beneath Prince Leo's silver blanket in a soft circle, bright enough to reflect in Christian DeMarco's eyes, then vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. No one moved. Mila Collins still stood beside the royal nurse, with one finger caught in the baby's small hand, unsure whether she had caused a miracle or committed an offense she did not understand. The elderly councilman who had dropped his glass lowered his gaze first. Christian noticed. He noticed everything. "Lord Harrow," he said. The old vampire looked up slowly. "You recognized her name. I recognized nothing, Your Majesty." The lie was smooth, but his pulse betrayed him. Christian stepped between Mila and the council, shielding her from the weight of their attention without appearing to do so. "Then your fear is poorly timed." Lord Harrow said nothing. Christian turned to the royal physician. "Take Leo to his private chamber. Monitor his temperature, breathing and pulse every 5 minutes." The nurse tried to move, but the baby tightened his grip on Mila and immediately began to whimper. His breathing quickened again. The physician looked from Leo to Mila. "She may need to come with us." Mila's stomach dropped. "My shift ends at 11, and my grandmother is expecting me." Christian studied her as if the words themselves were unusual. "You are concerned about your work schedule?" "I am concerned about losing my job." A few nobles looked offended by her honesty. Christian did not. "You will be compensated. That is not the same as being allowed to leave." The hall became even quieter. No human servant spoke to Christian DeMarco that way. Mila seemed to realize it a second too late. Her shoulders stiffened, but she did not lower her eyes. Christian heard the steady rhythm of her heart beneath her fear. She was frightened. She simply refused to let fear speak for her. "No one is accusing you of a crime," he said. "Then why were the palace records sealed?" "Because my son's condition changed when you touched him. I did not know that would happen." "I believe you." That answer surprised her. It surprised the council more. Christian looked toward the physician. "Mila Collins will accompany Prince Leo voluntarily. No restraints, no locked doors. Her belongings remain with her." Then he faced Mila again. "You may call your grandmother from the private wing. You may also speak with your employer in my presence, and no one will dismiss you for tonight's events." Mila glanced down at Leo. The baby's face had relaxed again, his grey eyes half closed, his fingers still wrapped around hers. Leaving suddenly no longer felt like walking away from a royal stranger. It felt like abandoning a frightened child. "Only until he is stable," she said. "Only until we understand what happened," Christian replied. It was not the same promise, and they both knew it. 10 minutes later, Mila entered a corridor far removed from the bright noise of the banquet hall. The private wing was lined with dark wood, old portraits, and amber lamps that cast warm pools of light across the carpet. The silence there felt different, not grand, lonely. Prince Leo rested against her shoulder, because every attempt to transfer him back to the nurse had made him restless. Mila had never held a vampire child before. She was surprised by how ordinary his weight felt. About 18 pounds. Warm, sleepy, trusting. Christian walked beside her, close enough to intervene, distant enough not to crowd her. "Has he been sick long?" Mila asked. "Since birth. What do the doctors call it?" "Blood fever." She waited for him to explain. He did not. "Is it dangerous?" Christian's jaw tightened. "Yes." Leo's tiny breath warmed the collar of her uniform. Does he always cry like this? Only when the fever rises, and it rose tonight. It has been rising for 6 days. Mila stopped walking. Christian stopped with her. Then why was he at a public ceremony? The nurse behind them drew in a careful breath. Christian's expression cooled. The High Council insisted the kingdom needed to see its heir. He needed rest. I am aware of that now. There was no excuse in his voice, only regret. Mila continued walking. Then perhaps the council should spend less time looking at him and more time listening to him. Christian turned his head toward her. No one had criticized the High Council in front of him for decades. No one had spoken as though the king himself might have failed his son. Yet Mila's words held no disrespect, only concern. It unsettled him more than defiance would have. They reached Leo's chamber, a large room filled with pale blue curtains, a white crib and shelves of untouched toys. The physician prepared his instruments while Mila sat in a cushioned chair near the fireplace. Leo remained calm, his pulse stayed even, his fever continued to fall. Christian watched from the shadows near the window. Mila did not sing an ancient spell or perform a ritual. She simply rested one hand on the baby's back and whispered, "You are safe. Nobody needs anything from you right now." Leo sighed and fell asleep. Christian's face changed for less than a second. Mila saw it anyway. The powerful king looked tired, not physically tired, tired in the way people became when they had been afraid for too long. "You should sit," she said. "I do not need to. That was not what I said." Christian almost replied, but a guard entered and bowed. "Your Majesty, the first records are ready." He handed Christian a black folder. Christian opened it, 26 years old, 2 jobs, no criminal history, no connection to vampire society. Parents deceased, raised by Evelyn Collins, ordinary details. Too ordinary. Then Christian reached the final page. The original birth certificate was missing. The hospital record had been replaced. Every document before Mila's 4th birthday had been created on the same day, 22 years ago. Christian lifted his eyes to her. Mila was still watching Leo sleep, unaware that someone had carefully erased the beginning of her life. Christian closed the folder without letting Mila see the pages. Outside the nursery windows, the first edge of dawn had begun to lighten the sky above the estate, turning the glass from black to deep blue. Inside, Prince Leo slept against Mila's chest, one small hand resting over the fabric of her uniform. The royal physician checked the child's temperature again, then looked at Christian with disbelief. "Normal," he said. For the first time in 6 days, Christian gave a single nod. "Leave us." The physician hesitated. "Your Majesty, I should continue monitoring him. You will remain outside the door." The man bowed and withdrew with the nurse and guards. When the room became quiet, Mila looked toward Christian. "You found something." He placed the folder on a table near the fireplace. "Your records before the age of 4 incomplete." Mila's expression did not change immediately. Then her hands stopped moving against Leo's back. "Incomplete how? Your original birth certificate is missing. The hospital listed on the replacement document has no record of your birth. Several files were created years after the dates printed on them." Mila stared at him. "That is impossible. It is unusual, not impossible. My grandmother has my documents. Evelyn Collins has copies of the same altered records." Mila rose carefully, shifting Leo without waking him. "Altered by whom? That is what I intend to learn. You had someone investigate me in less than an hour. My son's life may depend on you. That does not give you the right to take apart my life." Christian's face remained calm, but something in his eyes hardened. "A golden light appeared over my child's heart when he touched you. His fever vanished. Your name frightened a member of my council. Your childhood records were deliberately replaced. I would be failing him if I ignored any of that." Mila held his gaze. "And I would be failing myself if I let a king decide that fear makes every boundary disappear." The words settled between them. Christian had heard challenges from generals. Enemies had always wanted power. Mila wanted only to remain a person in a room where everyone saw her as an answer. That difference stopped him. "You are correct," he said. Mila blinked. "I am?" "You should have been informed before the search began." He moved to the door and spoke to the guard outside. "Arrange a secure call to Evelyn Collins. Mila will speak with her privately." Then he looked back at Mila. "No one will question your grandmother without your permission unless there is immediate danger to Leo." Mila studied him, searching for the hidden condition. "And am I allowed to leave?" Christian glanced at his sleeping son. Leo's breathing remained steady, but the faint color that had returned to his cheeks already seemed less certain as the distance between him and Mila widened by a few feet. "You are not a prisoner," Christian said, "but I am asking you to stay until sunset." "Asking?" "Yes." The word appeared difficult for him. I will stay until sunset. After that I go home with my own choice. Agreed. Christian crossed to the window. In the growing light his reflection did not appear on the glass. Mila noticed, then looked away before he could see her reaction. She had spent the evening surrounded by beings she had once believed belonged only in stories. Yet the strangest thing about Christian DeMarco was not what he was. It was the restraint in him. Power followed him into every room, but he held it as though he feared what would happen if he ever stopped controlling it. How old are you? Mila asked. Christian turned slightly. That is not relevant. You know everything written about me. I know almost nothing about you. 638, you asked. You do not look 638. Most people are kind enough not to mention it. For the first time, the corner of Mila's mouth lifted. It disappeared quickly, but Christian saw it. He had not expected anything from her. The private telephone rang on the side table. Mila answered at once. Grandma? Evelyn's voice came through weak but alert. Mila, where are you? Your manager said there was some kind of royal emergency. I am safe. I am still at the estate. Mila glanced toward Christian. Something happened with the king's baby. Silence followed, not confusion, recognition. Mila's fingers tightened around the receiver. Grandma, Evelyn's breathing changed. Did the child touch you? Christian turned fully toward the call. Mila's face lost its color. How did you know? Evelyn did not answer at first. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Listen to me carefully. Do not let anyone the necklace I gave you, and whatever happens, do not trust anyone on the High Council. Mila's free hand moved instinctively to the simple silver chain beneath her collar. Christian saw the motion. Why? Mila asked. What is this necklace? On the other end of the line, something fell. Evelyn drew a sharp breath. Then the connection went dead. Mila called her name twice. No answer came. Christian was already at the door. Send a protective team to Evelyn Collins's address, he ordered. No council personnel, only my personal guard. Mila lowered the phone slowly. She knew, yes. Christian looked at the necklace hidden beneath her uniform, then at the child sleeping peacefully in her arms. And now someone else knows she spoke to you. The protective team reached Evelyn Collins's house in 12 minutes. Christian knew because he counted every second while Mila stood beside the nursery window with Prince Leo in her arms and the silent telephone still resting on the table behind her. Dawn had fully reached the estate now, pale light spreading across the gardens, but no warmth entered the room. They are inside, Christian said after receiving the report through the small earpiece worn by his personal guard. Mila turned quickly. Is she safe? Christian listened for another moment. She is conscious. The line was cut when a tree branch damaged the cable outside the house. Mila released a breath, but the relief did not last. Then why did she sound frightened? Because she knew what Leo's reaction meant. And you still do not know? Not yet. Christian looked toward the silver chain at Mila's throat. May I see the necklace? Mila's hand closed around it beneath her collar. My grandmother told me not to show anyone. She also warned you about the High Council. I am not asking you to give it to me. You are the king. Asking can sound a great deal like ordering. Christian's expression tightened, though not with anger. Then I will be precise. You may refuse. Mila searched his face, then carefully drew the necklace into view. A small silver pendant hung from the chain, no larger than a quarter. It looked ordinary at first, worn smooth from years of use. Christian stepped closer but did not touch it. A faint design had been carved into the surface, two curved wings surrounding a small crown. His eyes sharpened. I have seen that symbol. Where? In the oldest section of the Royal Archive. Before Mila could ask more, Prince Leo stirred. The moment the pendant came near him, a soft golden line appeared beneath its surface. Leo opened his eyes and reached for it. Mila moved the necklace away. The light faded. Christian watched the pattern with absolute focus. We need to test what is happening. Mila immediately shook her head. Not on him, agreed. That answer came so quickly she paused. Christian crossed to the door and called for the royal physician. Within minutes the nursery had been prepared for a controlled observation. No blood, no spells, no restraints. Christian allowed only the physician, the royal nurse, Mila, and 2 members of his personal guard to remain. He ordered every council representative away from the private wing. The physician placed 3 chairs at equal distances from Leo's crib. First, the royal nurse approached. She had cared for Leo since birth, and he knew her voice. She spoke softly and held out his favorite silver rattle. Leo watched her but did not reach. His temperature remained elevated. Next came the physician. He carried no instruments and made no sudden movements. Leo turned his face away. The physician stepped back at once. Then Mila approached. She stopped 6 feet from the crib. Leo's head turned toward her. At 4 feet his hands opened. At 2 feet the tension left his small face. Mila did not touch him. She simply said. Leo's pulse slowed. The physician stared at the reading device beside the crib. His temperature is dropping again. Christian stood near the fireplace, motionless. Mila stepped back. She did. At 6 feet, Leo whimpered. At 10 feet, his breathing became uneven. Mila moved forward before Christian could speak. The child calmed immediately. "That is enough," she said. "He is not an experiment." Christian looked at the physician. "Your conclusion?" The physician glanced at Mila, then at the pendant. "Her presence creates a measurable response. It is not emotional familiarity alone. He knew her before she held him." "Could it be magic?" Mila asked. "Yes," the physician said, "but not any form I recognize." Christian stepped closer to the crib. "Could she be causing the illness and suppressing it when she approaches?" Mila's face changed. The question hurt, though she tried not to show it. The physician considered carefully. If she were, the fever should have begun only after her arrival. It did not. Prince Leo has suffered these episodes since birth. Christian nodded. "Then that theory is eliminated." Mila looked at him. "You suspected me. I considered every possibility, including that I might be harming a baby I had never met. Including the possibility that someone sent you without your knowledge." Mila fell silent. That possibility was harder to dismiss. Christian turned toward the physician. "Run the same observation once more after Mila removes the necklace." Mila unclasped the chain and placed it on a table across the room. She approached Leo again. The result did not change. The child reached for her. His pulse steadied. The pendant intensified the golden light, but it was not the source of the bond. "The necklace is a marker, not a cause." The physician nodded slowly. "Whatever Leo recognizes is within her." Mila looked down at her hands as though they belonged to someone else. "Within me?" Christian did not answer immediately. His attention had shifted to the doorway. Lord Harrow stood beyond the guards, his face pale and his posture rigid. "Your Majesty," the elderly councilman said, "the High Council requests access to the woman." Christian moved between Mila and the entrance. "Denied." Harrow's eyes settled on the silver pendant across the room. Fear flashed through them again. This time he could not hide it. "You do not understand what she is." Mila lifted her chin. "Then explain it." Harrow looked at her as if he had waited 22 years to hear that voice. "You are not supposed to be alive." The words remained in the nursery long after Lord Harrow spoke them. Mila stood beside Prince Leo's crib, one hand resting near the silver pendant on the table, while Christian faced the doorway with a stillness that made the room feel smaller. "Explain," Christian said. Harrow looked toward the guards, then toward the physician, as if measuring how many witnesses he could afford. "Not here. You came into my son's chamber without permission and told Mila Collins she should be dead. You will explain here." Harrow's mouth tightened. "The name Collins disappeared from royal records 22 years ago." Mila felt the floor shift beneath her, though nothing moved. "My parents died in a house fire." Harrow looked at her with something that was not quite pity. "That is what the documents say." Christian's gaze sharpened. "Who created those documents?" "I do not know." His answer came too quickly. Christian heard it. "Mila did too." "You knew my name," she said. "You knew the symbol on my necklace. Do not tell me you know nothing." Harrow lowered his voice. "There are truths that were buried to protect this kingdom." "Buried by whom?" Christian asked. Harrow did not answer. The golden reading beside Leo's crib began to rise again. Mila turned immediately. The baby had opened his eyes. His breathing was becoming uneven, as though the tension in the room had reached him. She stepped closer and placed her hand near his shoulder. Leo settled, but not completely. "He can feel this," Mila said. "Whatever conversation you are having, take it somewhere else." Harrow stared at her in disbelief. "Christ, you heard her," he said. "We moved to the adjoining room." Mila looked at him. "I am coming. You should remain with Leo. This is about my life." Christian held her gaze for a moment, then nodded. The royal nurse took Mila's place beside the crib, though Leo watched Mila until the door between the rooms closed. The adjoining study was smaller, lined with shelves and a single long table. Christian placed Mila's pendant in the center, but kept his hands away from it. Harrow stood across from them. "Start with the symbol," Christian said. Harrow looked at the pendant. "It belonged to a human family once connected to House DeMarco." "Connected how?" Mila asked. "I was never given the full account." "Then give us the part you were given." Harrow exhaled slowly. "The Collins family appeared in several sealed records. They were not nobles, they were not servants. Their name was attached to old medical reports concerning royal children." Mila's pulse quickened. Children with blood fever? Harrow's eyes shifted toward her. Enough. Christian moved closer to the table. Why were the records sealed? By order of the High Council. Which member signed the order? Harrow hesitated. The archive log was restricted. You were keeper of records at the time. Harrow looked toward the window. I followed instructions. Christian's voice remained quiet, but the lamps along the wall dimmed. Harrow finally said, Lord Victor Ashford. Mila knew the name. He had stood near the front of the banquet hall, silver-haired, elegant and calm, while the others panicked. Why would he care about my family? I do not know. Christian's expression turned colder. Another incomplete answer. Harrow placed both hands on the table. 22 years ago. I was ordered to remove all references to the Collins line from public archives. Birth records, property records, employment records, medical files, everything. I was told the family had violated an ancient agreement and that their identities had to be protected from retaliation. Protected? Mila repeated. Someone erased my childhood to protect me? Harrow looked ashamed. That was the explanation. Did you believe it? At first. Christian heard the fracture in his voice. What changed? Harrow closed his eyes briefly. A week after the order, I saw a private report. It listed 3 members of the Collins family as deceased, 2 adults and 1 child. Mila stopped breathing for a second. 1 child, a girl 4 years old. The number entered the room like cold air. Mila had been 4 when Evelyn told her the fire took her parents. What was the child's name? She asked. Harrow looked directly at her. Mila Ann Collins. Silence followed. Christian's attention moved to her, but Mila did not look away from Harrow, so the court believed I died. The file stated there were no survivors. But there were, yes. Harrow's voice was barely audible. There was you. Mila pressed her fingertips against the edge of the table to steady herself. Christian shifted closer without touching her. Who confirmed the deaths? He asked. Harrow swallowed. Victor Ashford's private secretary. Where is the original report? Missing. And the sealed medical records still in the lower archive unless someone removed them. Christian turned toward the door. My guard will retrieve them. Harrow stepped forward. Your Majesty, if Victor learns you are searching those files, he will act. Christian looked back. That sounds less like speculation and more like knowledge. Harrow's face tightened with fear. I saw Victor enter the restricted archive before the banquet began. He remained there for nearly an hour. Mila's hand moved to her pendant. Then he knew I was coming. Harrow shook his head. No one knew you would be assigned to the palace tonight. Christian looked toward the nursery wall, where Leo slept only feet away. Perhaps he did not know she was coming, he said. Perhaps he was checking whether the Collins records were still gone. At that moment, the study door opened. A guard entered carrying another black folder. Your Majesty, we found a payment record linked to the replacement birth certificate. Christian took the folder and read the first page. The payment had been issued by a private foundation 22 years earlier. The foundation no longer existed, but the authorization's signature remained Victor Ashford. Mila stared at the name. Her life had not been lost in a careless fire and buried by time. Someone had designed the silence around her, document by document, year by year, until even she believed there was nothing left to question. Christian read the payment authorization twice, then closed the folder with deliberate care. Mila stood across from him, the silver pendant cold against her palm, while Lord Harrow remained near the table, as though one wrong movement might make him disappear into the floor. Beyond the adjoining door, Prince Leo slept under the watch of the royal nurse. His steady heartbeat was the only calm sound in the suite. Victor Ashford approved the payment, Mila said. That does not prove he ordered anything. Christian looked at her. No. It proves he financed the false records. We still need the original medical files and a clear motive. Harrow glanced toward the hallway. The council will not allow you to investigate one of its senior members quietly. They do not have to allow it, Christian said. A bell sounded from the outer corridor. 3 slow notes. Harrow's face lost color. They are already here. The doors opened before Christian answered. Lord Victor Ashford entered with 5 members of the High Council behind him. He wore a charcoal suit and silver tie, perfectly composed despite the early hour. His pale eyes moved first to Christian, then to Mila, then to the pendant in her hand. The pause lasted less than a second. Christian saw it. Your Majesty? Victor said, bowing. We were informed that a human employee has been permitted inside the royal nursery after an unexplained magical incident. You were informed quickly, Christian replied. The safety of the heir concerns us all. Victor's gaze settled on Mila, especially when the threat may be standing beside him. Mila felt every council member turn toward her. She did not step back. Christian moved slightly, placing himself between her and the open doorway. "State your accusation clearly." Victor clasped his hands behind his back. The woman arrived without a verified history. The prince became dependent on her presence within minutes. A forbidden symbol appeared over his heart. "Her documents are false." "That is not coincidence. It is infiltration." Mila's voice remains assignment. "I was called in because another waitress got sick." A convenient explanation, one that can be confirmed by the staffing company. Victor gave her a thin smile. Humans can be influenced without realizing it. Christian watched him carefully. Victor was not trying to prove Mila guilty. He was trying to make uncertainty feel dangerous. "The physician has already eliminated the possibility that she caused Leo's illness," Christian said. "The fever began at birth. She may be connected to its source, or to its cure," Harrow said. Every head turned toward him. Victor's calm expression shifted by a fraction. "You have been retired from Archive Authority for 19 years, Lord Harrow. I suggest you avoid speculation." Harrow lowered his eyes, but Christian heard his pulse accelerate. Victor still frightened him. "This is not speculation," Christian said. He placed the payment record on the table. "Your signature funded the replacement of Mila Collins's birth certificate 22 years ago." The room went still. Victor looked at the page without approaching it. "My foundation supported hundreds of displaced families. I did not personally review every payment. This payment was individually authorized. Then someone used my signature." Mila studied him. He answered too smoothly. "Do you remember the Collins family?" she asked. Victor looked at her as though she were a servant who had spoken out of turn. "No, Lord Harrow remembers them. Lord Harrow is elderly." The insult was quiet, almost polite. Harrow's hands curled at his sides. Christian's voice cooled. "You also entered the restricted archive before the banquet. Why council business? Which records?" "Classified records," Victor paused. The others noticed. "The council has responsibilities that extend beyond the preferences of one ruler." The temperature in the room dropped. The lamps flickered. Christian did not raise his voice. "You are standing in my son's private wing, discussing his illness while refusing a lawful question. Choose your next words carefully." Victor inclined his head. "I reviewed historical cases of blood fever, that is all." "Then you knew the Collins name was connected to those cases." "I knew many names appeared in old reports." Mila opened her hand and displayed the pendant. "Did you know this symbol?" Victor looked at it. This time he controlled his reaction. "No." A soft sound came from the nursery. Leo had awakened. The royal nurse tried to soothe him, but his breathing quickly became uneven. Mila turned toward the door. Victor stepped into her path. "She does not return to the prince until the council completes an examination." Christian was beside him before anyone saw him move. He did not touch Victor. He did not need to. "Move." Victor held his ground. "Your judgment is compromised by evidence, by fear." Christian's eyes darkened. "Fear for my child has made my judgment precise." Leo cried again. Mila looked past Victor toward the nursery. "He needs me." "You do not know that," Victor said. "We tested it," the royal physician answered from the doorway. "Her presence lowers his fever. The response is measurable." Victor turned sharply. "Was blood collected?" Mila remembered Evelyn's warning. "No," she said, "and none will be collected without my permission." Victor's attention returned to her. "You are in no position to set conditions." Christian stepped fully between them. "She is under my protection. She sets every condition concerning her own body." The words carried through the room with absolute finality. Several council members exchanged uncertain glances. Victor had expected Christian to guard the air. He had not expected him to defend the waitress's rights before the entire council. "Then permit a non-invasive test," Victor said. A royal bloodstone placed near her hand. Nothing more. Christian looked toward Mila. "Your choice." Mila considered the sleeping child beyond the door, Evelyn's warning, and the false history someone had built around her. "I will agree if the stone remains in plain sight and nobody touches me." Victor nodded. A council attendant brought a dark red crystal from a sealed case and placed it on the table. Mila approached slowly. At first, nothing happened. Then she held her palm 6 inches above the stone. Golden light burst through its center, forming the same winged crown engraved on her pendant. Lord Harrow lowered his head. The royal physician whispered, "The guardian mark." Victor's composure finally broke. "Destroy the stone." Christian turned toward him. "Why?" Victor stared at the glowing symbol as though it had spoken his sentence aloud. "Because that bloodline was ended 22 years ago." Mila's breath caught. Victor realized his mistake too late. Christian's voice became very quiet. "You claimed you did not remember the Collins family." No one in the room moved. From the nursery, Leo's crying stopped the instant Mila stepped closer to the door. Victor looked from the child to the golden mark, and for the first time that morning, the High Council saw fear on his face. Victor Ashford's mistake hung in the air like a bell that could not be silenced. Christian did not order his arrest, not yet. A confession made by careless wording was not enough to survive a challenge before the full council, and Victor knew it. He recovered slowly, smoothing the front of his charcoal jacket as the golden symbol faded from the bloodstone. A figure of speech, he said. The Collins records described the line as extinct. Anyone who studied the archives would know that. You claimed you had no memory of them, Mila replied. Victor's pale eyes settled on her. Memory returns when evidence is placed before it. Christian stepped toward the table. Then you will remain available while my guard examines every record connected to your foundation. Victor lifted his chin. You cannot suspend a senior council member without a formal vote. I am not suspending you. I am restricting your access to the royal family. Christian turned to his guards. Lord Ashford is not to enter the private wing, the archive, or any chamber occupied by Prince Leo. His correspondence will be monitored until the investigation is complete. 2 council members started to object. Christian looked at them once. They fell silent. Victor offered a shallow bow, but the calm in his face no longer reached his eyes. Be careful, Your Majesty. Fear can make loyalty look like treason, and arrogance can make guilt speak before it is questioned. Victor left with the council under escort. Lord Harrow remained behind, staring at the darkened bloodstone. He will not wait, he said. Neither will I, Christian answered. He ordered Harrow placed under protective supervision, both for his safety and because Christian still did not fully trust him. Then he returned to the nursery. Mila sat beside Leo's crib with one hand resting through the wooden rails. The child had fallen asleep again, his fingers curled loosely around hers. She looked exhausted. Her hair had slipped from its neat service style, and a faint crease marked her cheek where Leo had rested against her shoulder. She still wore the same black uniform from the banquet. Christian had seen queens endure ceremonies with less composure. A guest room has been prepared, he said. I am not leaving him while his fever is unstable. The nurse can call you if it rises. Mila looked toward the woman standing nearby. She has been awake longer than I have. The nurse began to protest, but Mila was already rising. You should sleep for 2 hours. I can stay. Miss Collins, that is not necessary. Neither is collapsing beside the crib. The nurse blinked, then looked helplessly at Christian. He gave a small nod. She left reluctantly. Mila adjusted Leo's blanket, then noticed a young kitchen worker waiting near the doorway with a breakfast tray. The girl's hands trembled so badly that a cup rattled against its saucer. You can set it there, Mila said gently. The worker hurried forward, caught her shoe on the edge of the rug, and nearly lost it before anything fell. I am sorry, the girl whispered. Please do not report me for almost dropping coffee, Mila asked. The supervisor said mistakes in the royal wing are grounds for dismissal. Mila took the tray from her. Then no mistake happened. She noticed a red mark around the worker's wrist, where the heavy tray had pressed against the skin. How long have you been carrying these? Since midnight. Mila handed her a wrapped breakfast roll. Eat this before you go back downstairs. The girl stared at it. That is for you. There are 3. I am not allowed. Mila placed it gently into her hand. Then consider it missing under mysterious circumstances. The girl smiled despite herself and left with lighter steps. Christian had watched the entire exchange from near the fireplace. You protected her from a consequence she had not earned, he said. Mila poured a glass of water. She was tired, not careless. Most people in this palace would not notice the difference. That does not make the difference invisible. Later that morning, Christian observed her again from the gallery outside the nursery. A servant had been reprimanded for bringing the wrong medicine. Mila asked to see the label and discovered the physician's handwritten order had been copied incorrectly. She did not embarrass the clerk who made the error. She simply corrected the bottle, thanked the servant for waiting, and carried it inside herself. At noon, she gave her untouched lunch to a young groundskeeper who had been called inside because his sister was sick. At 1, she found the royal nurse asleep upright in a chair and quietly placed a folded blanket over her shoulders. None of it was performed for Christian. Mila often did not know he was watching. That was what disturbed him most. Court kindness was usually a transaction. Every gift expected loyalty. Every compliment concealed a request. Mila had more than enough, even when her own life suggested the opposite. By late afternoon, Leo's fever remained low. Christian entered the nursery and found Mila humming softly beside the crib. You may go home at sunset as promised, he said. Mila looked relieved, then worried. What happens if the fever returns? My physician will contact you, and if I am working? You will be compensated for every hour. Mila shook her head. That is not what I meant. He should not have to depend on whether I can leave a shift. Christian glanced at his son. Then we find a permanent cure, not by treating me like one. I understand. She studied him, surprised by the answer. Leo opened his eyes and reached toward Mila first, then turned his small hand toward his father. Christian froze. Leo had not reached for him during a fever episode since the night he was born. Mila noticed the hesitation in the king's face. Go on, she whispered. Christian placed one finger in his son's hand. Leo held Mila with one hand and Christian with the other. His breathing remained calm between them. For a moment the ancient king said nothing. Then Leo shaped his lips around a soft sound. Me. Mila's eyes widened. The baby repeated it, clearer this time. Mila. Christian looked at her across the crib. His son had spoken his first name and it was not his father's. Leo's first clear word left the nursery quieter than any royal command. Mila stared at the child, then at Christian, unsure whether to smile or apologize. Christian's expression did not change, but the hand resting beside Leo's remained perfectly still. For more than 6 centuries, generals and ambassadors had spoken his name with fear. His son had chosen Mila's. Then a guard appeared at the doorway. Your Majesty, Evelyn Collins has arrived. Mila turned so quickly that the chair beside her shifted across the rug. She is here? Under personal protection, Christian said. No member of the council was informed. Evelyn entered several minutes later with a cane in one hand and a dark wooden box held tightly against her chest. She was 73, small, silver-haired, and dressed in a blue coat over her nightclothes. 2 guards remained outside. The moment she saw Mila, the strength left her careful expression. Oh, sweetheart. Mila crossed the room and embraced her. Evelyn held her with one arm, refusing to release the box. You scared me, Mila whispered. The telephone went dead. I know. I am sorry. Evelyn looked over Mila's shoulder toward Christian, then toward Leo. The baby watched her with calm grey eyes. Evelyn's face changed, recognition, relief, all at once. It happened, she said. He recognized you. Mila stepped back. You knew he would? I hoped I would never find out. Christian approached slowly. Mrs. Collins, what is in the box? The truth your counsel buried. My counsel is not in this room, but its king is. Christian accepted the accusation without reacting. Then speak to Mila. I will listen only if she permits it. Mila looked at him, surprised again by the restraint. Then she nodded. Stay. Evelyn sat near the fireplace and placed the box on her knees. Its brass lock opened when she touched Mila's pendant to the keyhole. Inside lay a folded crest matching the necklace, and a leather journal so old that its edges had softened with time. Mila reached for the letter first. Her name was written across the front in faded ink, Mila Ann Collins. She looked at Evelyn. My middle name is Anne. Your mother chose it. Mila's breath caught. Evelyn placed a hand over hers. Her name was Sarah. Your father was Daniel. They loved you more than anything in this world. Mila unfolded the letter, but her eyes blurred before she finished the first line. Evelyn began speaking so Mila would not have to read alone. The Collins family served no throne, that is important. They were guardians by choice, never servants by birth. Christian's gaze shifted to the crest. Guardians of House DeMarco, Evelyn nodded. Centuries ago, the first DeMarco child born with blood fever was dying. No vampire medicine could help him. A human healer named Eliza Collins discovered that her presence calmed the fever. Her blood carried a rare natural resonance with the DeMarco line. She did not cure him by force or sacrifice. She stabilized him long enough for his body to recover. Mila looked toward Leo. That is why he reaches for me. Yes, Evelyn said. DeMarco infants can sense the guardian line before they understand language. Your heartbeat, your scent, the pattern in your blood. To him you feel safe. Christian's voice was low. Why did the bond disappear from our records? Evelyn opened the journal. Because later generations tried to control it. Some rulers treated the Collins family as royal property. The guardians refused. The final agreement made the bond voluntary. No Collins descendant could be compelled to serve, tested, or used without consent. Mila looked at Christian. He held her gaze. That agreement will be honored. Evelyn studied him for a long moment before continuing. The Collins family withdrew from court life, but they remained nearby in case blood fever returned. 22 years ago, Sarah and Daniel discovered that someone had been tracking every living Collins descendant. Victor Ashford, Mila said. Evelyn's silence confirmed it. They believed he wanted the line erased before the next DeMarco heir was born. Christian's expression hardened. Why? They did not know his full plan, only that he had searched old succession laws and medical records. Sarah and Daniel gave Mila to me, changed her records, and arranged the house fire to appear fatal. Mila stared at her. They planned the fire, only the story of it. The house was empty when it burned. Your parents left that night to draw attention away from us. Mila's voice became smaller. Did they survive? Evelyn looked down at the letter. Not for long. They disappeared 2 days later. I never found proof of what happened, but they did not still. Grief arrived strangely for people she could barely remember. Not as a sharp wound, but as an empty room suddenly given names. Sarah, Daniel, her mother and father. Christian moved closer, though he did not touch her. The original records may still prove who pursued them. Evelyn nodded. The journal contains copies of payments, dates and coded references. Your archive can verify them. Christian opened the journal carefully. Several pages carried Victor Ashford's initials beside transfers made through private foundations. One entry mentioned a future succession crisis and the removal of the guardian obstacle. Mila looked at Leo, then at Christian. He wanted the child to remain sick. Not merely sick, Christian said. Without a healthy heir, the High Council gains authority to nominate a successor. Evelyn's eyes filled with fear. Victor has a nephew in the royal bloodline. The final piece settled into place. Victor had not erased the Collins family because of an ancient feud. He had erased them because one day their existence might save the rightful heir. Leo made a soft sound from his crib. Mila crossed the room and lifted him. He rested his head against her shoulder without fear. Christian stood beside them, looking at the child and the letter in Mila's hand. Your parents did not abandon you, he said. They hid you because they believed your life mattered more than their own safety. Mila closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, but something stronger stood beside it. Then we prove what Victor did. Christian looked at her. We will. Evelyn reached into the bottom of the box and removed one final object, a sealed envelope marked with the DeMarco crest. There is more, she said. Your parents left this for the king who finally chose to protect you. Christian accepted the sealed envelope, but he did not open it immediately. The DeMarco crest pressed into the wax was old, far older than the paper itself, and beneath it someone had written a single line in careful ink. For the king who remembers that protection is not ownership. Mila saw the words and looked at Christian. He read them without expression, though the meaning reached him. Evelyn sat beside the fireplace with both hands resting on her cane. Leo remained calm in Mila's arms, his small fingers curled into the fabric near her shoulder. Christian broke the seal. Inside was a letter written by Daniel Collins, along with a thin sheet covered in dates, account numbers and names. Christian read in silence for nearly a minute, then his eyes lifted. Your father knew Victor was using charitable foundations to move money between council officers. Mila tightened her hold on Leo. For what purpose? Christian placed the accounting sheet on the table. To remove records, relocate witnesses, and purchase private access to succession archives. Evelyn closed her eyes. Daniel suspected as much. He suspected more than that, Christian said. He handed Mila the letter. The handwriting was firm at the beginning and less steady near the end. Mila read aloud because silence suddenly felt unbearable. If this reaches the DeMarco king, then our attempt to remain hidden has failed. Victor Ashford believes the next royal child will be born with blood fever. He has reviewed the law governing an unfit heir. If the child cannot survive the first year, the High Council may nominate a successor from a collateral branch. Mila stopped and looked at Christian, his nephew. Christian nodded. Nathaniel Ashford is descended from my grandfather's younger brother, distant but eligible if Leo dies without another direct heir. Evelyn's face tightened. Victor planned this before Leo was even born. He planned for the possibility, Christian said. Then, when the fever appeared, he acted. Mila continued reading. Victor asked whether the guardian line still existed. We refused to answer. After that, our records began to disappear. We believed he intended to erase the Collins family so no guardian could stabilize the child. If we are gone, protect Mila from both the council and the crown. She must never be treated as a cure that belongs to someone else. The final sentence blurred before her eyes. Christian waited until she lowered the page. Your father anticipated everything except your survival becoming visible at a royal banquet. And now Victor knows. Yes. Christian turned toward the guard at the door. Double protection around this wing. No one enters without my direct approval. The guard bowed and left. Evelyn looked toward the windows. He will destroy the remaining evidence. Not if we reach it first. Christian called Lord Harrow into the room. The elderly vampire entered under escort, his shoulders tense. Christian placed Daniel's accounting sheet before him. Do these archive codes still exist? Harrow adjusted his glasses and studied the page. Some may. The succession materials were moved to the lower vault 15 years ago. Who controls access? The keeper of seals. Christian's expression hardened. Victor. Harrow nodded. But there is an older entrance from the western chapel. It was sealed before he took office. I know the mechanism. Mila watched him carefully. Why help us now? Because I signed the order that erased your name. I told myself I was protecting a child. Then I saw the death report and remained silent. Silence became easier each year. Until I walked into the palace, until the past stood in front of me. You will guide my guard to the western entrance. If the records are there, they will be secured in my name. Harrow bowed, at once. Before he could leave, a messenger hurried into the room carrying a sealed council notice. Your Majesty, Lord Ashford has called an emergency session. He claims the royal heir is under human influence and requests temporary authority over Prince Leo's medical care. Mila's face went cold. He wants legal cover, Christian said. He opened the notice. The session was set for sunset, less than 3 hours away. Victor had moved faster than expected. Christian turned to Harrow. Go. Bring me every record you can find before the council gathers. Harrow left with the guards. Mila looked down at Leo, who had begun tracing the edge of her necklace with one small finger. What happens if the council votes with him? They cannot remove Leo from my care without proof that I endangered him. Victor will say keeping me near him is the danger. Then we show them the physician's findings and the guardian records. Evelyn shook her head. Evidence will not matter if Victor controls the room. Christian looked toward the closed door. Then I will control the truth. 2 hours later, the palace had changed. Corridors that had been quiet now carried hurried footsteps and guarded whispers. Council members arrived early. Servants avoided eye contact. Christian remained in the strategy room reviewing every page Daniel had left, while Mila stayed with Leo and Evelyn in the nursery. The child had eaten, slept, and awakened without another fever spike. For the first time, hope felt measurable. Then every light in the private wing went dark. Not dimmed, extinguished. Mila stood at once. Evelyn gripped her cane. Leo made a soft, frightened sound. A second later, the emergency lamps glowed red along the floor. The nursery door opened, but the person standing there was not one of Christian's guards. It was Victor Ashford's private secretary, wearing the silver badge of temporary council authority. By order of the emergency session, he said, Prince Leo is to be transferred for independent examination. Mila stepped between him and the crib. No. The man's gaze moved to her. You have no authority here. Mila lifted Leo into her arms. The baby immediately clung to her. Neither do you. Behind the secretary, 3 council attendants appeared with a covered medical carriage. No weapons, no raised voices, only paperwork, badges, and the cold confidence of people who expected obedience. Then Christian's voice came from the dark corridor. Take one more step toward my son, and every authority Victor gave you ends before sunset. He emerged with 2 royal guards beside him and a leather ledger in his hand. His eyes were fixed on the secretary. Tell Lord Ashford the western vault was not as empty as he hoped. The secretary's face changed. Christian raised the ledger. We found the original succession payments, the sealed Collins medical records, and an order bearing Victor's private mark. He did not erase Mila's family to protect the kingdom. He erased them so my child would have no guardian when blood fever returned. Mila felt Leo's heartbeat against her own. Christian looked at her across the nursery. We have enough to expose him. Then a new alarm sounded from the western side of the palace. One sharp note followed by silence. Christian turned toward the corridor. A guard's voice reached him through the communication device at his ear. Your Majesty, Lord Ashford has left the council chamber. Prince Leo's secondary nursery has been breached. Christian looked at the child in Mila's arms and understood at once. The transfer order had never been the real attempt. It had been a distraction, and Victor now knew exactly where the evidence had been taken. Christian understood the distraction before the final alarm faded. Victor had expected the council transfer order to pull royal guards toward the nursery while his own people reached the western vault and destroyed the evidence. But the plan had failed in one critical way. Leo was not in the secondary nursery. He was still in Mila's arms. Christian turned to the captain beside him. Lock every exit from the western wing. No one leaves with documents, sealed boxes, or archive cases. The captain bowed and moved at once. Christian looked toward Evelyn. You remain here with 2 guards. Then he faced Mila. Take Leo to the interior safe room. Mila shook her head. He will know if you leave upset. His fever could rise. The safe room is less than 50 feet away, and Victor is searching for the evidence because he knows it can expose him. He may also know Leo needs me. Christian's eyes darkened. That is precisely why you should be hidden. Mila held his gaze. Hidden is what kept the truth buried for 22 years. Leo pressed his face against her shoulder, sensing the tension. Christian looked at his son, then at Mila. Every instinct in him demanded control. Close the doors, remove the risk, decide for everyone. But Mila had already told him what protection without choice became. You stay beside me, he said. You follow every instruction if the situation changes. Agreed. They moved through the private corridor under guard. Leo wrapped securely against Mila in his silver blanket. Christian carried the recovered ledger beneath his coat. The palace had entered emergency protocol. Amber lights marked protected routes along the floor, while heavy doors closed behind them one by one. No guests wandered from room to room. The silence felt organized, deliberate, and dangerous without a single raised voice. At the entrance to the western wing, Lord Harrow waited beside two royal guards. His face was grey with worry. The archive chamber was opened from the council passage, he said. Victor has the Keeper of Seals authority. The guards could not stop him without a direct command. Christian's voice became cold. They have one now. They descended a narrow staircase into the lower archive. The air smelled of old paper, cedar and stone. At the bottom, a circular chamber opened beneath a vaulted ceiling. Hundreds of sealed ledgers lined the walls. In the center stood Victor Ashford beside a table covered with files. Two council attendants held archive boxes. He was not destroying anything, he was rearranging it. You came quickly, Victor said. Christian stopped 20 feet away. Mila remained behind him with Leo. Step away from the records. Victor looked toward the child. You should have accepted the transfer order. The appearance of resistance will not help you at the emergency session. The session is no longer your concern. Christian removed the recovered ledger and placed it on a nearby stand. Your payments to falsify Mila Collins's records are documented. Your access to succession law is documented. Your order to remove the Collins medical files is documented. Victor's expression remained composed, and none of those actions prove an attempt against the prince. Your own memorandum does. Christian opened the ledger to a marked page. You wrote that the Guardian obstacle had to be removed before the next heir entered his first year. Harrow stared at Victor. Mila felt Leo's grip tighten against her uniform. Victor glanced toward the attendants. They lowered their eyes. That language referred to political interference, he said. The Collins family had no lawful authority over royal medicine. Mila stepped into view. My family never asked for authority. They asked to be left free. Victor finally looked directly at her. Your family misunderstood its place. The sentence was quiet, but it revealed more than anger would have. Christian heard ownership in it. Mila heard contempt. My place is not yours to decide, she said. Victor's gaze moved to Leo. The child cannot remain dependent on one human woman. The kingdom needs stability. You mean control, Christian said. Victor turned back to him. I mean succession. You have ruled too long to pretend sentiment is policy. And you have served too long to pretend ambition is duty. Christian touched the communication seal at his wrist. A faint blue light moved across the chamber walls. Victor noticed too late. The emergency council is listening, Christian said. Every word since we entered this room has been transmitted to the chamber above. Victor's composure fractured. You cannot record a sealed archive discussion without consent. You called an emergency session concerning my son. I provided the evidence they requested. A council voice sounded through the seal, clear and formal. Lord, answer the charge. Did you order the Collins line removed from public records? Victor looked around the chamber. The attendant stepped away from him. Harrow lowered his head, waiting. Mila held Leo close. For the first time, Victor had no audience he could control. I authorized the removal, he said at last. To protect the succession, Christian did not move. By ensuring my son had no guardian, Victor's jaw tightened. By ensuring no human family could hold the royal remain steady. My parents did not threaten you. They refused to become property. They were an unpredictable variable. They were people. Victor said nothing. The council voice returned. Did you direct the creation of false death records for Mila Collins? Victor looked at the ledger boxes and the glowing communication mark. His silence became an answer. Then Leo began to cry. The sound was soft at first, then strained. Mila looked down and felt fate rising beneath his blanket. His fever, she whispered. Christian moved to her side. Victor watched with sudden interest. You see, he said, the bond is unstable. Mila pressed one hand gently against Leo's back. No, he is frightened. She stepped away from Victor, slowed her breathing, and spoke softly to the child. "You are safe. Your father is here. I am here." Leo's cries weakened. His heartbeat steadied against her palm. The council heard everything through the open seal. Christian looked toward Victor. "My son does not need your version of stability." Leo's fever continued to fall. "He needs people who protect him without owning him." The council voice spoke again, firmer now. "By emergency authority, Victor Ashford is suspended from office pending formal trial. Royal Guards will secure the archive and all related records." Victor stood motionless as the attendants moved away. Christian did not celebrate. Mila did not look relieved. There were still missing records, unanswered questions about her parents, and a child whose illness had not yet been permanently cured. But the oldest lie in the palace had finally been spoken aloud by the man who created it. Victor Ashford was escorted from the archive without resistance. But the victory felt incomplete, while the royal guards sealed every ledger, box, and private memorandum in the chamber. Prince Leo had calmed, yet the fever had not disappeared. Heat still lingered beneath his skin, faint but persistent, as though the illness had retreated rather than surrendered. The royal physician arrived within minutes and examined him under the archive lights. "His pulse is stable," he said, "but the pattern has changed. The episodes are coming closer together." Mila looked at Christian. "The bond is only calming him." "Not yet," the physician answered. He opened one of the recovered Collins medical files. Most of the pages were brittle, written by hand, and marked with dates spanning more than 4 centuries. The original Guardian records describe 2 stages. Recognition stabilizes the child. Consent completes the bond. Christian's expression hardened. Define consent. A voluntary declaration from the Guardian, witnessed by the parent and sealed through the family crest. No blood is required, no physical sacrifice. The Guardian chooses whether to remain connected to the child's recovery. Mila looked down at Leo, and if I say no, the physician did not hesitate. Then nothing happens. The agreement was designed to prevent coercion. Christian turned to her fully. "You will not be pressured. Your son is getting worse. That does not remove your right to choose." Mila studied his face. He was frightened again, but he had not used fear as permission. That mattered. Lord Harrow approached with another sealed record. "Your Majesty, we found the original Guardian Covenant." He placed it on the table. The document carried 2 signatures from centuries earlier, one DeMarco, one Collins, and beneath them a clause written in dark ink. "The Guardian may stand beside the heir, but shall never belong to the crown." Mila read the line twice. Then she looked at Evelyn, who had been brought down under guard and now stood near the staircase. "Did my parents know how to complete the bond?" Evelyn nodded. "Yes, they left instructions in case you were ever discovered." "Why did you never tell me?" "Because telling you would have placed the weight of a kingdom on a child." Mila looked toward the sealed archive doors where Victor had disappeared. "And because you thought he would find me." "Yes," Evelyn's voice trembled. "I wanted you to have a normal life." Mila glanced at her black waitress uniform at the Royal Archive, at the baby holding her finger as though he had known her forever. "I suppose Normal had other plans." Christian almost smiled, but Leo shifted weakly in her arms. The physician looked at the readings again. "We should return to the nursery. The covenant must be completed somewhere the prince feels safe." They moved upstairs under full guard. By the time they reached the private wing, the council had issued a formal order removing Victor from every office and placing the succession process under direct royal protection. His nephew, Nathaniel Ashford, publicly renounced any claim connected to Victor's actions and agreed to testify. The conspiracy had lost its political foundation. Still, Leo's fever rose. Mila sat beside the crib while Christian stood on the opposite side. Evelyn placed the Collins crest on a small table between them. The physician opened the covenant to the final page. "Only a statement of free choice. The Guardian must speak plainly." Mila looked at Christian. "What exactly am I agreeing to?" "To help stabilize Leo until his body outgrows the fever," the physician said. "Based on the records, that may take several months. The bond does not control you, change you, or require you to remain in the palace. It allows your presence to guide his healing even when you are not touching him. And after he recovers, the bond becomes dormant." Christian's voice was low. "You may still leave whenever you choose." Mila looked at the child. Leo's eyes were half open, fixed on her through the fever. She thought of Sarah and Daniel, parents who had hidden her because they believed her life belonged to her. She thought of Victor, who had erased people because he believed power gave him ownership. Then she thought of Christian, who had every reason to command her and had chosen not to. Mila placed her hand over the Collins crest. "I choose to help Leo DeMarco," she said. "Not because a throne demands it, not because an old agreement binds me. I choose it because he is a child who deserves to be safe." Christian placed one hand beside hers, not over it, and I witnessed that choice as his father, not as her king. The crest warmed beneath Mila's palm. Golden light moved across its surface, soft and steady, then traveled through the crib rails like morning sunlight. Leo inhaled deeply, his small body relaxed. The fever reading began to fall. 99 degrees. 98.6. Normal. The physician checked again, then again. "It is holding," he whispered. Leo opened his eyes. He reached one hand toward Mila and the other toward Christian. This time, his grip was strong. Evelyn covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. Mila bent close and whispered, "You are safe, mild." Then Lord Harrow entered with one final recovered file. "Your Majesty, we found the last report concerning Sarah and Daniel Collins." Mila stood slowly. Harrow handed it to her, not Christian. The report confirmed that her parents had escaped Victor's first search and lived under assumed names for nearly 2 years. They had died later in a highway accident while traveling to deliver evidence to a federal judge. No attack, no hidden execution, no unanswered disappearance. Their final statement had survived in the court file. Mila read the last line aloud. "Tell our daughter we did not leave her behind. We walked away so she could keep walking forward." The room grew still. Christian stood beside her while she cried quietly, not from uncertainty now, but from truth finally given shape. Leo slept peacefully between them. Victor's power had been broken, the bond had been chosen freely, the fever had begun to heal, and after 22 years, Mila finally knew that her parents had not vanished into silence. They had spent their final days protecting the future she was now strong enough to claim. By morning, the palace no longer whispered about Mila Collins as a threat. It whispered about the records that had been opened, the testimony Victor Ashford could no longer deny, and the child who had slept through the night without a single return of blood fever. Christian stood before the full High Council in the same black formal coat he had worn at the banquet, but the room around him had changed. Victor's chair was empty. His family crest had been removed from the wall. Every recovered ledger, payment authorization, sealed memorandum and medical report rested on the long table beneath the council lights. Mila sat beside Evelyn near the front of the chamber, not behind the servants, not hidden beyond the doors. Prince Leo remained in the nursery under the care of the royal physician, his temperature normal and his breathing steady. Christian did not begin with Victor. He began with the Collins family. For 22 years, he said, Sarah and Daniel Collins were listed as criminals, fugitives, or casualties of an accident that never happened as recorded. Their true service was erased because they refused to surrender their daughter and their freedom to this court. No one interrupted him. Today, every false record is revoked. Their names will be restored. Their final statement will be entered into the royal archive without alteration. Mila felt Evelyn take her hand. Across the chamber, Lord Harrow lowered his head. He had already submitted a written confession describing his role in removing the records. Christian had accepted the confession, but not excused the silence. Lord Harrow will lose all remaining archive privileges, Christian continued. He will also assist an independent commission until every altered file has been corrected. Harrow bowed. I accept. Then Christian turned to the central evidence. Victor had financed the false records, restricted the Guardian medical files, manipulated succession law, and attempted to gain control over Leo's treatment. His own words in the Western Archive had been heard by the entire Emergency Council. There was no mystery left to hide behind. The Council voted unanimously to strip him of title, office, and succession authority. He would remain confined under royal law while a full civil trial reviewed the financial crimes connected to Sarah and Daniel's case. Nathaniel Ashford appeared before the council by secure transmission and formally renounced any claim that could benefit from Victor's actions. The throne will not pass through conspiracy, Christian said, and no child's illness will ever again be used as a path to power. The statement ended Victor's plan completely. The succession law was amended that same morning. No council could remove a sick heir from parental care, nominate a replacement while treatment remained possible, or seize authority over a guardian bond. Mila listened as the changes were read aloud. They were not promises, they were law. After the session, The royal physician met Mila and Christian in the nursery with 3 specialists from the human medical community and 2 vampire researchers. For the first time, both sides studied the old Collins records together. Mila refused any plan that depended only on her presence. Leo should not grow up believing he can survive only if I am near him, she said, and no future child should have to wait for one family to appear. The physician agreed. The guardian bond had stabilized Leo, giving his body time to recover, but the old journals also described breathing patterns, temperature changes, mineral deficiencies, and environmental triggers that had been ignored for centuries because the council had preferred secrecy over research. Mila allowed non-invasive tests and volunteered family medical history from Evelyn's records, but she gave no blood. Christian supported every boundary without argument. Over the next 3 weeks, that combined guardian stabilization with medicine, controlled light exposure, nutrition, and monitored rest. Leo improved each day. The bond remained, but he no longer weakened when Mila left the room. By the end of the 3rd week, she could return to her apartment overnight without his fever rising. That mattered to her more than anyone understood. It meant she had helped him without becoming trapped by his need. Christian arranged repayment for every hour she had missed at work and covered Evelyn's outstanding hospital bills. Mila accepted the wages she had earned, but refused the rest until Christian changed the offer. Instead of a private gift, he created a public medical fund in Sarah and Daniel Collins's names, dedicated to children from both human and vampire communities. Evelyn smiled when Mila agreed. "Your parents would have liked that," she said. 1 month after the banquet, Christian invited Mila to the library, where the Collins covenant had been restored behind protective glass. He placed a formal document on the table. "The court has recognized a new office," he said. "Royal Guardian, independent of the Crown, with authority over medical ethics, child protection, and human representation in palace policy." Mila read every page. "This says I can refuse royal orders. Yes. It says I cannot be removed by the king alone. Correct, and it gives me my own staff. You complained that too many people in this palace were invisible." Mila looked up. "I did not complain. You were very clear." A small smile passed between them. Then her expression grew serious. "I will accept under 3 conditions. Human and vampire children receive equal protection, the Collins bond remains voluntary forever, and the medical fund cannot be controlled by the council." Christian nodded. All 3 are already written into the final section. Mila turned the page and found his signature beneath the terms. He had anticipated her because he had listened. She signed her name beside his. That afternoon, in the restored garden outside the nursery, Leo took his first unsteady step while holding the edge of Mila's coat. Christian stood several feet away, watching with a quiet pride he no longer tried to hide. Leo released the fabric, wobbled, and reached toward his father. Christian knelt and caught him gently. Mila watched the king hold his son beneath the warm afternoon light. The fever was gone, the records were restored. Victor's plan had failed. Her parents' names were no longer buried. For the first time since entering the palace, Mila could look at the future without wondering which secret waited behind it. 1 year later, spring returned to DeMarco Palace with a quiet confidence that no one had felt in generations. The gardens that had once stood empty during Prince Leo's illness were now filled with children laughing beneath flowering trees. Human families and vampire families walked the same stone paths without hesitation, stopping together at the new Sarah and Daniel Collins Children's Pavilion, where physicians from both communities worked side by side. What had begun as a desperate effort to save one child had become a promise to protect many. Prince Leo, now walking with determined little steps, raced across the grass with the fearless enthusiasm only children possessed. He laughed as he chased bright butterflies through the rose garden, his grey eyes full of curiosity instead of pain. The physicians no longer measured his temperature every hour. The episodes of blood fever had never returned. The treatment developed from the restored Collins records, combined with modern medicine and the freely chosen guardian bond, had become the new standard of care for every child born with the condition. The illness that had once been hidden behind locked archives was now openly studied, understood, and treated. Nearby, Evelyn Collins sat beneath a flowering maple tree wrapped in a light blue shawl, smiling as she watched Leo run. Her health had improved steadily during the past year. She often joked that she had lived long enough to see impossible things become ordinary. She no longer worried that someone would knock on her door to erase another chapter of her family's history. Their names had been restored, their sacrifices had been honored, their truth had finally found a permanent home. Myla Collins stood near the garden fountain speaking with two young physicians about the newest children's outreach program funded through the Sarah and Daniel Collins Foundation. She no longer wore a waitress uniform. Instead, she dressed simply in a navy coat bearing the Silver Guardian crest, a symbol that represented responsibility rather than rank. Her office remained independent from the throne exactly as the new law required. She inspected hospitals, reviewed medical ethics, protected children regardless of bloodline, and possessed the authority to challenge palace decisions whenever necessary. Some advisors had predicted conflict between the royal guardian and the vampire king. Instead, they found something rarer. Mutual respect had become stronger than authority. Christian DeMarco watched from the palace terrace before quietly joining her in the garden. The years had not changed his appearance, but those who served beside him often remarked that the palace itself felt warmer now. It was not because the ancient stone had changed. It was because the king had. He still ruled with discipline, but no longer with distance. His council had become transparent. Human representatives now held permanent advisory seats. Palace records remained open for independent review. No child, human or vampire, could be denied treatment because of status, tradition, or fear. Christian paused beside Myla as Leo proudly carried a tiny wooden toy bird toward them. "Look," Leo said with unmistakable excitement. "Bird." Christian knelt beside his son. "You found the brightest one in the garden." Leo nodded proudly before placing the toy into Christian's hand, then immediately reached for Myla's. They walked together beneath the flowering branches without ceremony, without guards surrounding every step, simply as three people enjoying a peaceful afternoon. After Leo ran ahead to chase another butterfly, Christian slowed his pace. "There is something I have wanted to say for a very long time." Myla looked toward him. "You are unusually serious. I have spent 6 centuries believing strength meant carrying every burden alone." He smiled faintly. "You proved I was wrong within a few days." Myla laughed softly. "I remember someone who investigated my entire childhood before breakfast. I deserve that reminder." They continued walking until they reached the old oak tree overlooking the lake. Christian stopped there. "When Leo first reached for you, I believed my son had chosen the person who could save his life." He looked directly into her eyes. "Now I understand something different. My son recognized your blood. I chose your heart." Myla remained silent for a long moment. The breeze carried the scent of spring flowers across the water. "I needed to hear that," she admitted quietly, "because I never wanted to become another obligation attached to an old promise." "You never were." Christian's voice remained calm. "The guardian bond brought you into our lives. Everything after that belonged to your choices and mine." Myla reached for his hand. "Then my choice is simple." Christian looked at her with the same patience he had learned over the past year. "I choose this family. Not because history expects it, not because a kingdom approves it. I choose it because every day beside you and Leo has felt like home." Christian gently closed his hand around hers. There were no grand speeches, no royal proclamations, no audience waiting to applaud. The most important promise of his long life was spoken in the quiet. "Then whatever years are given to me, I hope you will walk beside us." "I will," Myla answered. Ahead of them, Leo turned around and waved both hands excitedly. "Come," he called. They smiled and walked toward him together. As the afternoon sunlight settled across the palace gardens, visitors paused to watch the small family crossing the bridge over the reflecting pond. Many remembered the frightened child who had once cried through an entire royal banquet. Many remembered the unknown waitress who had quietly stepped forward when no one else could help. Few knew every detail of what had happened. They did not need to. The truth was visible before them. A little boy who had once reached for a stranger now ran confidently between the two people he trusted most. A king who had once believed power solved every problem had learned that trust could never be commanded. And a young woman who believed she was ordinary had discovered that kindness freely given could change the future of an entire kingdom. Sometimes history remembers the names of kings. Sometimes it remembers great victories. But on that peaceful spring afternoon, the story everyone chose to tell was much simpler. A child reached for the kindest person in the room, and because one young woman answered with compassion instead of fear, 2 families were healed. An ancient injustice was finally undone, and a kingdom learned that the strongest bond is never created by power. It is created by choice.